was one of those gray mornings where hope felt like a luxury. Emma, shoes worn thin and heart even thinner, dashed down the alleyway, clinging to the final seconds before her interview. The pavement was slick betrayal in disguise. One wrong step, and she went down hard. Pain shot through her wrist, but what caught her attention wasn't the fall. It was the weathered hand reaching out, steady and sure. A man, disheveled yet oddly composed, crouched beside her with a presence that whispered calm in the chaos.
Hello, I'm going to tell you this incredible story. Remember that to receive new stories like this, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the notification bell. Let's get to the rest of the story.
His name was Michael. His clothes hung loose, layered and mismatched, a textbook picture of someone living on the streets. And yet, he spoke like a poet. "Storms test the roots," he said, handing her a piece of stale bread and splitting a can of peaches he had clearly been saving. Something about his voice, measured, deliberate, felt far from random. In that alley, beneath the buzz of distant traffic, a fragile seed of something rare was planted. Emma didn't know what to make of him. Her world was spreadsheets and job boards, not cryptic men with kind eyes and nothing to lose. Still, she sat with him for longer than expected, eating quietly. She hadn't realized how hungry she'd been. For food, yes, but also for peace, for something that felt human. In a way, that quiet moment was more nourishing than any paycheck. It had the makings of an emotional story, the kind that sneaks up on you when you're not watching. She learned little that day, other than his name and that he liked Shel Silverstein. But the way he listened, as if her rambling mattered, was unusual. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He simply nodded like he understood the weight of what she wasn't saying. She walked away late for her interview, already knowing she wouldn't get the job. But oddly, she didn't feel like she'd lost. There was something about that real story she'd stumbled into. The days that followed blurred. Rejections came, polite and cold, and Emma found herself retracing her steps. Back to that same alley, to that same man. Michael was always there, as if waiting, but never waiting for anything in particular. They spoke about everything and nothing. Weather, the absurdity of resumes, the sound of silence in a city that never sleeps. It was strange how quickly the alley became a refuge. Stranger still, how touching stories often begin in the most unexpected places. One morning, she brought him coffee. He smiled, not with gratitude, but with familiarity, as if she were no longer just a passerby. It wasn't charity, it was companionship. The coffee turned into longer conversations, and the alley no longer felt like a shortcut. It felt like a meeting place. Their world narrowed to that space, where two souls bruised by life found warmth in the company of someone who saw beyond surface scars. Michael never asked for anything, but in his quiet, unspoken way, he gave a lot. Emma had no idea who he truly was. Not yet. But something told her that there was more to him than the streets allowed people to see. She didn't realize it then, but she had just stepped into the opening chapter of a real story that would change everything. The night air bit harder than usual. Emma, carrying leftovers from her own meager dinner, found Michael shivering beneath a stairwell. His arm was bleeding, poorly bandaged, possibly from a fall or worse. Without hesitation, she crouched down and cleaned the wound, using the small first aid kit she kept in her purse just in case. He winced but said nothing. She noticed then his hands were too steady, too trained. Something didn't add up. Still, her instinct wasn't to interrogate. It was to care. That night, after some hesitation, she invited him to sleep on her couch. Just one night, she told herself. Just until the bleeding stopped. But compassion has a way of turning into something deeper when shared over silence and soft blankets. They didn't talk much, but her apartment felt less empty with his presence. A strange calm settled over the chaos of her usual routine. Emma didn't have much, not in her fridge, not in her bank account, and certainly not in her future plans. But what she had, she shared, and Michael never took more than he needed. He folded the blankets neatly each morning and left before sunrise, only to return later with stories about the people he'd observed at the park. You'd be amazed what people confess to pigeons, he once said with a chuckle. It was oddly touching. As the weeks passed, the alley became secondary. Emma found herself planning meals for two, even though they never called it that. It wasn't charity anymore. It was routine, a connection built on shared space and unspoken agreements. This wasn't just an emotional story. It was a living rhythm. And in that rhythm, something in Emma softened. Something in Michael, too, though he never said much. Sometimes she'd catch him staring at her bookshelf, pulling out titles like Freakonomics and The Art of Strategy. He devoured them quietly, absorbed. One night, she found him fixing her old radio. Just needed new wires, he muttered. It was the kind of thing you don't learn on the street. But she let it go. People have histories. She wasn't ready to ask about his. Michael had an odd dignity, the kind you don't expect from someone carrying their life in a backpack. He never tried to impress, never demanded attention. And maybe that's why he drew hers. There's something magnetic about someone who holds their pain quietly. Their shared moments turned into a routine that neither of them named, but both depended on. The world outside still rejected Emma. Job interviews led nowhere. Bills piled up. But with Michael near, she didn't feel as alone. He was like a thread holding her sanity together. And she, whether she realized it or not, was giving him something he hadn't had in a long time, a place to rest. And soon, their connection would be tested in a way neither of them could foresee. Emma wasn't snooping. At least, that's what she told herself. But curiosity is stubborn. One morning, while Michael was out, she noticed her resume printed and marked up. Red ink circled phrases, suggested changes, even improved formatting. It was better, substantially. She confronted him gently. He simply smiled and shrugged. Old habit. That answer rattled something inside her. Michael's habits didn't fit the narrative of a street dweller. He made espresso with expert precision when her machine broke. He quoted market trends like a morning podcast. He'd explain tech jargon she hadn't even heard of, then apologize as if he'd said too much. I used to be in finance, he said once, but never elaborated. That little comment lingered in her mind for days. He carried himself like someone who'd once owned suits tailored to his spine. And then there were the books, economic theory, venture capital, biographies of CEOs. He read them quickly, efficiently, as if rereading rather than discovering. Emma couldn't ignore it anymore. There was a real story underneath the surface. One night, she Googled Michael Alanis, a name she'd once heard him mumble in his sleep. What she found left her breathless. An article from 3 years prior. A tech empire, Alanis Tech, shaken by scandal. Its CEO missing after a mysterious boating accident. Presumed dead. Emma stared at the screen, the grainy photo staring back at her with haunted eyes. It was him. Older now, thinner, but it was him. A man the world believed was gone. A man living quietly beneath her roof. She felt betrayed. And yet, she also felt something else, protective. Why was he hiding? Why didn't he trust her with the truth? But then again, had she earned it? People don't just vanish without a reason. And judging by the guarded way Michael moved through the world, his reasons weren't simple. She had uncovered the tip of a very complicated iceberg. Emma didn't confront him. Not right away. Instead, she observed. Noticed how he flinched at sirens. How he avoided cameras. How his eyes scanned exits before settling in any room. Whatever had driven him underground, it wasn't fear, it was purpose. And now, with her resume freshly rewritten and her heart more tangled than ever, she knew she had a choice. Press for answers or walk away. She didn't walk away. It started with a whisper over morning coffee. Emma asked, was it really an accident? Michael stiffened, his spoon hovering mid-air. The silence that followed said more than any confession could. Victor, he said at last. My partner. My friend. He's the reason I disappeared. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just told the truth like a man finally letting down his guard after years of exile. Victor had been siphoning money, laundering assets under fake shell companies. When Michael discovered the fraud, it was too late. The board didn't believe him. There was an accident, but Michael survived. Barely. He went into hiding, hoping to gather proof, knowing no one would believe the ramblings of a disgraced CEO. Emma listened, eyes wide, realizing she wasn't in a touching story anymore. She was in the middle of a corporate thriller. Against all reason, she offered to help. Her new job, ironically, at one of the shell companies Michael had identified. "Perfect," he said. "You can get what I can't." It was dangerous, yes, but she was tired of feeling powerless. If Michael was risking everything, so could she. Their late-night planning sessions felt like espionage. Hidden drives, burner phones, encrypted emails. It was the kind of real story no one would believe without proof. Emma wore a wire. Not always, just when it mattered. She played innocent, took photos of documents, even sweet-talked the head of security to bypass internal firewalls. And slowly, piece by piece, the puzzle took shape. Victor's name was all over the files. Money trails, offshore accounts, and enough signatures to bring the entire house down. They had what they needed, but not much time. Michael's plan was bold, reckless even. "We walk into the lion's den," he said, "but we walk in as wolves." He crafted a fake identity, posed as an investor, and got himself invited to the next shareholder meeting. Emma's role? Trigger the presentation that would expose everything, live, on screen, in front of the board and press. It sounded like a movie. It felt like war. And just before the big day, they shared a moment, quiet and unsaid. A glance that spoke volumes. If this failed, they'd both be ruined. But if it worked, maybe, just maybe, the truth could finally breathe. The plan was in motion. All that was left was to show the world who Michael really was, and who Victor truly became. The meeting was packed. Suits lined the boardroom. Cameras rolled. Shareholders murmured, unaware that they were about to witness the unraveling of an empire. Michael, disguised in tailored arrogance, stepped into the room. The years on the street had carved humility into his face, but today, he wore power like an old coat. It fit perfectly. The wolves had arrived. Emma, in the control room, took a breath and hit play. The screen behind Victor flickered, then flooded with damning evidence. Transaction logs, secret emails, wire transfers. At first gasps, then silence, then chaos. Victor's face drained of color. "Who did this?" he shouted. Michael stood. "I did." It wasn't just a reveal. It was a reckoning. A moment years in the making. Police arrived within the hour. Victor tried to run, but the evidence was airtight. Emma's recordings sealed the deal. Michael was cleared of all charges, and within days, reinstated as CEO. The media swarmed. Headlines screamed about the emotional story of a fallen king returning to his throne. But the spotlight came with shadows. Fame isn't freedom, it's just another cage. Emma, now hailed as a whistleblower, found herself overwhelmed. Michael was suddenly busy. Interviews, lawyers, press. He had traded the alley for the penthouse. And while she was proud, she felt a gap forming between them. The man she had shared soup with in silence was now giving sound bites to CNBC. She wondered if the quiet man in her living room was gone for good. She didn't resent him, but she missed him. Fame changes people, but more than that, it separates them. She avoided the office gala, skipped the press events, let him have his moment without her. And Michael, well, he never pushed, never called. Maybe he thought it was better this way. Maybe he believed she deserved a life outside of his storm. But real bonds don't break. They bend. They ache. And deep down, both of them knew this wasn't the end of their real story. It was just the part where the music pauses, waiting for someone brave enough to hit play again. Months passed. Emma found a new rhythm. A better job, a decent apartment, a few laughs that didn't feel forced. She wasn't just surviving, she was living. But something lingered in the background like a song you can't quite forget. She sometimes still bought 2 coffees instead of 1. Old habits, maybe, or maybe hope. One afternoon, she got an email. A job interview at a remote cafe. Odd, but the salary was good. The name on the invite? Atlantis Industries. Her heart skipped. Curiosity dragged her in. She walked in, nerves high. And there he was, Michael. No suit, no cameras, just him, waiting with that same calm, poetic look from the alley. They didn't cry. They didn't shout. He handed her a cup of coffee and said, "You're hired." It was simple, human. She smiled. No paperwork. He grinned. Just trust. This wasn't about jobs. This was about finishing what they started. Their real story didn't need fanfare. It just needed presence. He told her everything. How he had tried to reach out, but feared dragging her back into the storm. How he'd watched her from afar proud. How none of it, power, money, reputation, felt right without her presence anchoring him to who he used to be. And her? She had never stopped wondering if he'd come back. They didn't talk about forever. They talked about tomorrow, about rebuilding, about doing things right this time. Slowly, honestly, side by side. It wasn't a movie ending. It was better. It was real. And that, above all, is what made it an emotional story worth telling. Now, tell me, if you were in that alley, would you have stopped? Or would you have kept walking like most people do? We never really know who's behind a tired face, dirty clothes, or a lost gaze. This real story is more than just an emotional story. It's a reminder that every life has value. And sometimes, the most touching stories begin in silence, in the most unlikely places. Do you believe everything in life has a purpose? Or do you think it was just coincidence? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you would have done in Emma's shoes. And if this story touched you in any way, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. There's plenty more real stories like this coming, and you won't want to miss them.